Sentencing in the Oscar Pistorius case got underway this morning. Last month, the Paralympian was found guilty of culpable homicide for the shooting dead of his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp. His defense team presented arguments in the mitigation to the North Gauteng High Court today. Pistorius's emotional state was once again explored during the testimony of psychologist Dr Lore Hartzenberg, who testified that the athlete has always shown remorse for killing Reeva Steenkamp. Let's cross live now to the North Gauteng High Court, where Iman, Rappetti and Karyn are standing by. It's over to you, Iman.
Good afternoon, Dudu. You recall last month, of course, Oscar Pistorius found guilty of culpable homicide. We're back inside the North Gauteng High Court as we enter the closing chapter of this particular saga, trying to answer the question that perhaps is on many people's lips today. Will Oscar Pistorius actually serve a day behind bars? Karyn was inside court today. Karyn, one of these submissions made by a probation officer had prosecutor Karyn seething with some of the options for sentencing that he was putting forward.
We had a fascinating scenario at Iman today where the Correctional Services Department had been asked through the defense team. They essentially went to the state and said, please can we get a report on Oscar Pistorius' suitability for correctional supervision. They got this report this morning, and the Correctional Services Department, which is of course a government department, essentially said he's a prime candidate for it. We believe that he should spend about 3 years under correctional supervision, which means he doesn't go to prison, but does mean that he does have certain limited abilities to socialize, etc., etc. The backlash certainly on social media was almost immediate, and Karyn describing that submission as shockingly inappropriate, asking the official in question whether he had considered the terrible impact that Reeva Steenkamp's death had had on those who loved her.
Maybe just describe in a bit more detail, Karyn, what correctional supervision and the suggestions put forward, particularly in Oscar's case, comprise.
Well, essentially what happens with correctional supervision is it's a form of house arrest. The exact nature of it is determined between the correctional supervision officer and the accused or the convicted person. Basically, you're allowed to go out, you're allowed to work. Oscar Pistorius would be allowed to go and train, should he be given correctional supervision. Interestingly enough, he would also be allowed to compete if he got permission from the Department of Justice and Correctional Services for him to be able to do that. So it does create quite a bit of leeway, but the official really stressing in his evidence, Joel Moringa, that in fact correctional supervision is a harsh sentence, that in fact it's limited the rights of the accused or the convicted person to really engage a lot with humanity. They essentially work, they may go to church, and that's pretty much it. Of course, Karyn, as we've seen, going to argue very strongly that simply you can't compare it to the kind of harshness of a jail term, which he believes Oscar Pistorius deserves.
So there are going to be, several processes to this final week when we're hearing sentencing. Today we are witnessing arguments in mitigation of sentence, and those are all the arguments that will minimize a potential sentence that the judge will give. We also heard from psychologist Dr Lore Hartzenberg today, and she described Pistorius as a broken man, a man who's lost everything, a man who in fact still hasn't gotten over the events of the 13th of February last year.
Of course, Karyn responding to that, well, at least, he's still alive, in direct reference to Reeva Steenkamp. And we do expect the state to make much of the fact, as it, obviously understandably will, that a young woman has lost her life and left a huge void to those who loved her. But essentially the psychologist called because she had been with Oscar Pistorius since, almost immediately, the days after the shooting incident, wanted to give her direct first-hand observations of him and really put forward to the court that this was not a person who had not shown remorse, which of course remorse is one of the massive issues in sentencing. We see very harsh sentences imposed where the court believes that an accused person hasn't taken responsibility and hasn't demonstrated remorse. So clearly her evidence very key to that defense argument that Oscar Pistorius is massively sorry and that sending him to jail to rehabilitate him is not necessarily a requirement at this point.
All right, Karyn, we can leave it there for the moment. Dudu, when we come back a little later on, we'll talk about what we can expect for the rest of the week outside or inside the North Gauteng High Court. Right now, from a peak hour Pretoria CBD, it's back to you in Johannesburg.
Thanks, Iman. We'll be catching up with you a little bit later. That was Iman, Rappetti and Karyn from the North Gauteng High Court.